Hi, and welcome back. So, this is chapter 32. It's titled Sprinkles. All right? I love Flora. It was in my hair. You see the waitress right here. And there goes Ulysses flying. Here he goes. Pass the money else. Oh, pass the knife. He just barely missed it. Sunny side up, he thinks. Splat! Landed right on the window. How funny is that? I love the use of the comics. It makes a chapter, it kind of breaks it up. Here he is. He says, I flew? Where's Flora? Is that a piece of a donut? Sprinkles. Who doesn't like sprinkles? Oh, and then he's just out. Do you see him down here? Oh, he's so funny and cute. Still has little bald patches. He just had way too much thinking about sprinkles and everything. Chapter 33. Does rabies itch? His eyes were closed, his head was bleeding, and Flora knew from terrible things can happen to you that head wounds bleed excessively, whether they are bad or not. All head wounds bleed excessively. Don't panic. Okay, said her father. Use this. He handed her his tie. Flora knelt down. She had a very powerful sense of deja vu. Was it just yesterday that she had bent over the body of an unknown squirrel in Tootie's backyard? Ulysses, she said. She dabbed at the blood with the tie. The squirrel didn't open his eyes. An eerie quiet descended. The whole of the giant donut became particularly calm. Everything, the donuts, the squirrel, her father, seemed to hold its breath. Flora knew what was happening. She had read about it, and terrible things can happen to you. She knows a lot based on books. I mean, because books just make you smarter, right? It was the calm before the storm. The air becomes still, the birds stop singing, the world waits, and then the storm comes. Inside the giant donut, there was a moment of deep quiet, of collectively held breaths. And then someone said, I think that was a rat. We know it was not. But it was flying, said another voice. It was in my hair, said Rita. The cook shouted, I'm going to call the cops. That's what I'm going to do. Rita was right behind him. Forget about the cops, Ernie. Call an ambulance. I have rabies. It was in my hair. You? Said Ernie. He pointed at Flora with his knife. You tripped me. That's her, said Rita. She's the one. Plus, she brought that thing in here in the first place, dressed up like a baby doll. I did not, said Flora. Dress him up like a baby doll, and this is all of your fault. The criminal element said that sometimes it was wise to put criminals on the defense by making slanderous, untrue comments. The surprising unfairness of the tactic will often stop criminals in their tracks. It seems to work. Rita blinked. She opened her mouth and closed it. My fault, she said. Flora bent over Ulysses and put a finger on his chest. She felt his heart beating in a slow, thoughtful way, and gratitude and relief washed through her. And her own heart, which had been beating much too quickly, slowed down inside. It answered the squirrel's heart with its own measured thud, thud, thud. Ulysses? Her heart seemed to say. Ulysses? I'm calling the cops, said Ernie. George Buckman, how do you do? Shouted Flora's father. Is there any reason to call the police? Well, for one, said Rita, it was in my hair. Do you think that the police could be notified of a squirrel in your hair? Said Flora's father. The idiocy of this question is unsettling logic made Flora suddenly grateful for her father, and she picked up Ulysses and cradled him in her left arm. I think I can feel the rabies coming on, said Rita. My stomach itches. Well, I don't think that's how that works. Does rabies itch? Said Flora's father. I'm going to call somebody, said Ernie. She tripped me. Whom do you think it would be wise to call in this matter? Of the tripping, said Flora's father. He opened the door. He gestured for Flora to walk through it. She did. The door swung shut behind them. Run, said her father. They both ran, and at some point Flora's father started to laugh again. Oh, it wasn't a ha-ha kind of laugh, but it was a whoo-wee kind of laugh. Hysteria, thought Flora. She knew what to do for hysteria. Her father needed to be slapped. Unfortunately, there wasn't time for that. And they had to make their getaway quick. Her father laughed all the way to the car. He even laughed when they were at the car. He laughed in place while his hands were at 10 and 2. He laughed as he backed out of the parking lot and drove away. He stopped laughing only once, long enough for him to shout, Holy Bagoomba, in the voice of Dolores, the parakeet. And then they went back to laughing. That's so funny. Chapter 34, The Getaway. They were making their getaway, but they were making their getaway slowly, because even when Flora's father was thinking and that things were hilarious, even though he was talking like the parakeet, he still apparently did not believe in speeding. Flora kept looking behind them to see if they were being followed by the cops, or Rita or Ernie. Then she finally looked down at Ulysses. His eyes were still closed, and a terrible thought occurred to her. What if he is unconscious? She said to her father. Her father, of course, laughed. Flora tried to remember what to do. What did the terrible things can happen, do you say, about consciousness? There was something making a person with a head injury speak of favorite nursery rhymes so that speech patterns, slurring, etc. could be evaluated. Flora couldn't keep track. Flora stared at the squirrel. He could speak. Could she doubted? Also, she doubted he knew any nursery rhymes. There was a very small cut on his head, but the bleeding had stopped, and he was breathing softly and regularly. Ulysses, she said. And then she remembered in its entirety the ominous sentence from Terrible Things. It is absolutely imperative that you keep the potential concussed patient awake at all times. She shook the squirrel gently. Oh, gently. She shook the squirrel gently. His eyes stayed closed. She shook him harder. And he opened his eyes and then closed them. Flora's heart thudded once and then dropped all the way to her toes, and she finally was terrified. Do superheroes die? She said out loud. Her father stopped laughing. Listen, he said. We won't let him die. Flora's heart thudded again, a different kind of thud. It wasn't fear this time. It was hope. Normally she doesn't hope, but it's good to be positive. Remember, like we talked about, it's good to be hopeful and optimistic. Does that mean that you won't try to hit him over the head with a shovel, she said. I won't, said her father. Ever? Ever. You promise? I promise. Her father looked at her in the rearview mirror. Flora looked back. Let's go to your place then, she said. He'll be safe there. At these words, George Buckman started laughing hysterically again. That's where we're going to pick up on chapter 35. All right. Bye, guys.